So next up, more S scale for your entertainment. Joel Weber. Um, how you doing, Joel?
I'm good. I'm good. And I actually got my camera working. I hadn't used that in the past.
I
Joined a little bit of technology here.
I twisted Joel's arm or a couple days ago to do this,
Okay.
and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to try to keep things within our time parameter here. And the theme tonight, going to kind of talk a little bit about joining my history in S Gauge to how I've also worked through control systems. You know, S gauge trains start out as American Flyer. You put them on the track, you hook up two wires, and you're good to go. And American Flyer AC, everything the reverse unit is inside the engine itself. So all you're doing is providing power and ground, and then it's the forward, neutral, reverse, neutral, and everybody knows that dance. And if you're into high rail or American Flyer, that's how things ran. And that's how I started. And I'm probably a lot like a lot of people. You get into whatever gauge you do because that's what you fell into. My parents got a couple of trains from my aunt and uncle, bought a couple trains, put it under the Christmas tree. They didn't have any children. They gave the trains to us. And eventually they made their way to my house. And my neighbor in Atlanta was a flyer guy. And he got me introduced to the swap meet market. And voila, off I went. So that's how I started. And this, for instance, this locomotive is a repainted American Flyer GP9 or GP7. And one of the things about Flyer, there's no concern about scale. You notice how long the trucks are, how big the couplers are, and that sort of thing. They're not really scale. They're meant for children to play with. Now, this one's been modified internally, and we'll talk about that in a second. You wouldn't know that by looking at it, besides the repaint job. As I continued playing with the trains and introduced to more things, of course, you run into American Models, who originally was doing scale kits. And everything they did was scale wheels, scale couplers, that sort of thing. But they developed uh, high rail wheels so they could run on the Flyer track, which are much bigger. And the whole toy train aspect of it, the track is big, the flanges are big, so that kids could play with them and they could manage it and do that successfully. Another manufacturer was S Helper, and S Helper and American Models did a lot of work together. In fact, S Helper derived from them helping out in S Gauge. The control system that goes with this train is called Locomatic, and you had this controller here, and basically instead of the forward neutral, reverse neutral, this gave you the ability to control some of the features of the train, running the strobe or the moonlight, running the headlight, stopping it, going back forward again, stopping it, going forward again, or in reverse. So you really kind of simulated more a real control of a train instead of the old fashioned forward neutral, reverse neutral, etc. In parallel to high rail, the scale guys, like everybody else in scale, HO, N gauge, the direction was controlled by the power pack itself, forward and reverse. You're still in all of those systems controlling the track itself. Now, in scale, in DC power, people went to DCC. Well, the AC version of DCC, first with Lionel, was TMCC, and then Legacy with a controller like this gives us the ability to now control the train instead of the track. And earlier, Charles Rowe was on, and I bought a lot of Lionel stuff through Charles Rowe. They've gotten a lot of my money over the years. Lionel went big a few years in a row, developing a number of locomotives. As an example, here I've got an SD70. I've got a couple of these in different paint schemes. The nice hallmark of all these different control schemes that everybody's come up with is they all run in the old-fashioned Flyer forward neutral, reverse neutral. They can run in what we call conventional, but you can also use the newer schemes. And now I can control the train. I can run it at slower scale speeds. You can incorporate sound, whether it's the crew or the dispatcher or whatever. So there's a lot more things you can do with it. Of course, the stuff gets a lot more expensive. And I really love them because they're more modern. There's the various aspects of it. The smoke units are better, et cetera, et cetera. So I've got a few of those going on. But again, always run with the ability to work with the old systems. Further, now I've recently bought a couple locomotives like I needed anymore. In fact, I told my wife I wasn't buying any more trains. I've got other hobbies that are calling for me too. Lionel came up with what we call Flyer Chief. Now, the nice thing about this is it's a very simple scheme. The reason I bought these is my grandchildren. It's a very simple, you've got a horn, you've got a bell, you've got the talk, you've got forward and reverse, and that's it. There's nothing fancy to it. You put the train on there, you throw power at it, you turn this thing on, and away they go. And I've bought 3 of these locomotives simply so my grandkids could run them. I had actually got involved in some other hobbies. I lived in the Chicago area for 24 years, and I'd built a rather extensive layout, never actually finished all the scenery, and I had actually started to wane in the hobby. I told somebody once if my house had burned down, that I would have taken the insurance check and walked away. But that didn't happen, and I moved down here near 2 of my grandchildren, the only 2 I had at the time, and that re-energized me in the hobby and building a layout because they're amazed by it. They like playing with the accessories, which is one of the hallmarks of Flyer and Lionel, the standard Lionel stuff is the operating accessories. And my grandkids love playing with those. They like pushing the buttons. They like to see the things moving, that sort of thing. But the Flyer Chief locomotive controls were really made it super easy for kids to play with the trains. So when I built my layout here, I first wired it up just so I could run the 4 tracks. Now I'm going back and rewiring because I've got to put in a couple of reverse loops so that my yard could be entered from 2 different directions, a couple of parallel control switches so I can move the power from the inner track to the outer track if I want to run the one train through it. The one thing I had done on my first big layout is I went common ground. And I'm not doing that here because while the common ground made it real easy to put the wiring together and a lot less wire, it had some compromises. Like with the old Locomatic, if I hit the horn, if I was running 2 or 3 Locomatics and I hit the horn, all of them blew. And obviously that wasn't acceptable. So playing around with that, the nice thing is with all these control systems, the Legacy's hooked up to all the tracks, the Locomatic can be hooked up. If the particular engine isn't using those, it is not affected by those signals. If I don't turn on the Legacy, the standard conventional takes over. As long as I have that control system turned on, I can use it. So I can use a mix and match on the same tracks, and I don't have to be exclusive on a given track or run multiple wire setups and that sort of thing. I'm going to have a few toggle switches, and that's about it. And I'm really looking forward to having that run. And maybe once I get that all together, I'll produce a video and show some of the various things in action and, bring that back to the group. So, as I said, I got into Flyer simply because that's what we had in the family. I've got into these various control systems because I like the more modern controlling the train and not the track. My layout in Chicago, I had an upper loop, fell into it by accident how I got there, but I had 2 80-foot loops on the upper level. And I used to have guys come over monthly and just play with trains. And there was one day I was running 2 Legacy trains on one track with one control, jumping back and forth between them. And there was 3 other guys, 2 with Flyer Chiefs and 1 with a Legacy controller, 3 trains running on one loop, and they were each controlling one train. So we had 5 trains running on the 2 loops, and we were having a ball. And I had 2 on the lower tracks just running, and it was amazing how quiet it suddenly got when we shut everything down. You didn't even realize how much sound is produced when you're running 7 trains all at the same time. So just So various things I've played with, had a lot of fun with, and a lot of variety. Unfortunately, some of the things are harder to get today. Lionel has kind of de-emphasized the American Flyer. They're not selling enough, and they're really kind of deciding it's not necessarily worth their effort. We're hoping they sell that to somebody else. In the meantime, American Models is making trains still. Now theirs are just straight conventional running. The S Helper has been sold to MTH, who's then sold it to Scale Trains. And they did one set of locomotives. I'm sorry, MTH did one set of locomotives. So we're hoping they'll continue with that. There's a lot of stuff still available out there that gets moved around and that sort of thing. So lots still can be done, but would like to see more manufacturers come back into it, and who knows what they may do with their control systems.
It's absolutely fascinating that the control systems are backwards compatible over all these generations. That's a good thing, of course, but it's a really neat that you can do that. Yeah.
Just got to know a little bit of wiring is all.
Well, thank you very much, and really interesting. Maybe we can. Currently you have a layout then?
I've got it's 12 by 20, 2 tracks up, 2 tracks down. Kind of paused on the scenery this winter. I had some things that had to be done. I got involved in some other things, but I'm kind of getting, now that my new basement, I had my basement windows replaced with glass block to prevent some leaking issues that I was having. So going to get charged back into it because I've got some scenery. This layout is going to get finished. Unlike my layout in Chicago, it never got completed. Tracks were all running, because you have to put the tracks in first. You don't want to build your tracks and then put in scenery and then have to tear something out because something wasn't working. So my first step is make sure it all works so that when I start laying down ballast and putting in trees and all this sort of thing, that I don't have to tear it out again.
Well, maybe we can feature your layout as it progresses, because I've been featuring my rustic buff and old Gothic now, the remake of it, since I moved and downsized, and Jim Keller convinced me to show my layout step by step. Maybe we can do likewise something with yours in that regard. Yeah.
Sure. One of the things I want to show, but I wasn't quite ready yet because I want to make it more invisible. I've got some creative techniques for hiding access points.
Well, that would
And
be
that's something
interesting.
I would like to share because
That's a great
I'm
subject.
kind of a creative guy, and I came up with some solutions before, and I reapplied the same solutions here. So that's something I would like to show down the road.
Well, maybe we can have something next month. Who knows?
If not, then soon.
Fair enough. Well, thank you very much for your segment this evening. Very
All right, you're
interesting.
welcome.
Picked up a fact that controllers are backwards compatible. That's really fascinating.